Get out of my sight, you filthy maid! Veronica's voice echoed through the marble halls. You think your dark skin and fake manners make you fit to work in my house? You're nothing but a nobody in a borrowed uniform. The room went silent. The other staff stood frozen as tears welled in the maid's eyes. But before anyone could breathe, the front door opened. The CEO himself, Veronica's husband, stepped in. His voice was calm, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Veronica, do you even know who she really is? Before we continue this shocking story, tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? And if you love powerful stories with emotional twists, don't forget to subscribe. It really supports the channel and helps us share more inspiring stories with you. The Miller's mansion stood like a palace on the edge of the city. Tall marble pillars, crystal chandeliers, and wide glass windows that caught the morning sun like diamonds. To outsiders, it was a house of dreams, owned by Ethan Miller, the CEO of one of the country's most successful technology firms. People called him the man with the golden heart, known for his humility and kindness despite his enormous success. But inside that mansion, not everyone shared his warmth. His wife, Veronica Miller, ruled the home with an iron tongue. Stunning, elegant, and always wrapped in designer perfection, she was the kind of woman who thought charm could be bought and respect could be demanded. The house staff feared her, for she could turn from sweet to cruel in a heartbeat. The mansion had everything, except peace. One rainy morning, the new maid arrived. Her name was Grace, a young black woman in her late 20s, dressed neatly in a simple uniform, her hair tied back, her voice calm and respectful. She carried herself differently from others, straight posture, gentle eyes, and a quiet strength that seemed out of place for a servant. When she entered, the other maids whispered among themselves, "Did you see her hands? Not a scratch on them. She doesn't look like someone who's ever scrubbed a floor." But Grace didn't respond. She smiled softly and began her work. From the first day, she stood out. She noticed everything. The way the antique clock ticked 2 seconds late. The way Ethan preferred his coffee strong but never said it out loud. The way the old gardener's hands shook while trimming the roses. She fixed things before anyone even asked. Ethan noticed, too. He often passed her in the hallway, greeting her with a polite nod. Something simple, but enough to earn Veronica's suspicion. "Ethan," Veronica said one evening, swirling her wine, "why do you always greet the help?" "That's what they're paid for, to serve quietly." Ethan looked up from his newspaper and smiled faintly. "Veronica, respect doesn't cost anything." But she only rolled her eyes. "Respect is earned, not given. And people like her? They're used to taking advantage of sympathy." From that day on, Veronica watched Grace closely. Grace, however, never responded to the silent hostility. She did her duties with calm precision, cleaning the grand hall, arranging flowers, and sometimes reading quietly in the servant quarters after work. The book she always carried caught Veronica's attention one day, The Psychology of Leadership. A maid reading that? Veronica's suspicion turned into annoyance. One morning, as Grace was polishing the silverware, Veronica approached her. "Tell me, Grace," she said in her sharp, elegant tone, "where did you work before this?" Grace paused, then replied softly, "A private residence, ma'am." "That's it? You speak as if you went to finishing school," Veronica sneered. Grace smiled politely. "My mother taught me to speak well, ma'am. She said dignity doesn't depend on a job title." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Charming words! For a maid!" She turned and walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor, but something about Grace's calmness irritated her deeply. Days turned into weeks. The mansion prepared for a high-society charity event, Veronica's favorite way to show off her status. She was hosting some of the country's richest wives, including media personalities and investors. Everything had to be perfect, from the chandeliers to the folded napkins. Grace worked tirelessly, staying late to ensure every flower and plate was flawless. But Veronica only found faults. The roses are too red. The cutlery isn't shiny enough. You're standing too close to the guests, the staff, whispered that Veronica's cruelty came from insecurity. Grace, with her quiet confidence, made her feel small, even without saying a word. That evening, as guests began to arrive, Veronica floated around the hall like a queen, sparkling diamonds on her neck, a flawless smile on her lips. She waved gracefully, but her eyes still followed Grace across the room. When Ethan finally arrived home from work, he nodded politely at Grace as she offered him a towel. Veronica caught that moment and her face hardened. In front of everyone? She hissed under her breath, pretending to smile for her guests. He's acknowledging a maid like she's one of us. The night went on with laughter and music, but under the glow of chandeliers, tension brewed like a storm. Grace kept her distance, moving quietly, serving drinks and ensuring guests were comfortable. Then, fate decided to test her. As Grace reached over to pour a glass of wine, a drop spilled onto the edge of the white tablecloth. Just one drop, but Veronica saw it. And that single mistake became her weapon. The sound of her chair scraping against the marble silenced the room. "Are you blind?" she shouted. "Do you know how much this tablecloth costs? You worthless woman!" The guests froze, embarrassed. Grace stammered, "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll clean it right away." But Veronica's voice grew louder. "Don't touch it. You'll ruin it even more. Honestly, Ethan must be out of his mind hiring people like you." Grace's hands trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She bowed her head slightly, whispering, "Forgive me, ma'am." Veronica sneered. "Forgive you? You should be grateful I don't throw you out this instant." The humiliation hung in the air like poison. The other staff stared down, afraid to breathe. That was the night everyone in the mansion realized. This wasn't about a stain on a tablecloth. It was about something deeper, and soon. The truth about who Grace really was would turn the entire mansion upside down. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the mansion's tall windows, warm and golden, but inside the air was tense. The echoes of last night's humiliation still lingered. The servants whispered quietly over breakfast in the staff kitchen. "Did you see how mad Mrs. Veronica was? She screamed like the maid had broken her crown. Poor Grace, she didn't even raise her voice." Grace entered silently, carrying a tray of folded napkins. Her face was calm, though her eyes showed the faint tiredness of someone who had cried quietly in private. She didn't respond to the gossip. She simply said good morning, smiled faintly, and began her duties. But Veronica wasn't done. She wasn't satisfied with one night of dominance. She wanted everyone, including her husband, to see Grace's place in this house. That afternoon, she called for an urgent meeting with the staff, right in the grand dining hall. The marble floor gleamed, the chandelier sparkled above, and the long table was lined with silverware, the same one where Grace had spilled that single drop of wine. "Everyone here," Veronica announced sharply, "needs to be reminded of their positions." Her voice was sharp and cold. Ethan was at work and she felt in full control. Discipline has been slipping, manners are forgotten, and respect, she glanced straight at Grace, has turned into arrogance. Grace stood at the far end, her hands folded before her, saying nothing. "You," Veronica said, pointing her perfectly manicured finger. "Come here." Grace obeyed, walking slowly to the center of the room. The staff looked down, afraid to meet her eyes. "Last night," Veronica continued, "you embarrassed me in front of high-profile guests. Do you realize what that means for this household's reputation?" Grace spoke softly. "I didn't mean to, ma'am. It was an accident." "An accident?" Veronica interrupted. "Do you think accidents are acceptable here? This isn't some cheap apartment. This is the Miller Mansion. Everything here represents me." The tone was venomous. But Veronica wanted more. She wanted to break her pride completely. She grabbed the wine glass from the table and poured a few drops onto the same spot on the tablecloth. "See this?" she said loudly. "This is what happens when incompetence walks in through my doors. Look closely. This is the difference between refinement and filth." Grace's throat tightened. Her lips quivered slightly, but she still didn't speak back. Tears glimmered, but she held them. The maids behind her shifted uncomfortably. "Say something," Veronica demanded. "Don't just stand there like a statue." Grace met her eyes for the first time. her voice soft but steady. "I said I was sorry, ma'am. I'm here to work, not to argue." For a brief second, the room fell quiet. Her composure was unnerving, almost regal. Veronica felt it, that strange feeling again, as if she wasn't shouting at a servant, but at someone far above her. "Get out!" Veronica spat finally. "Before I lose my temper again." Grace bowed her head slightly and left the room. But as she walked away, Veronica called out one last insult, loud enough for everyone to hear. "People like you should remember, no matter how much you pretend, you'll never belong among people like us." Grace stopped at the door. Her voice trembled slightly, but she replied, "Belonging doesn't depend on where we stand, ma'am. It depends on how we treat others when we're standing above them." The words struck deeper than she intended. A hush fell over the room. Veronica's lips parted, speechless, as Grace walked out. That night, Veronica couldn't sleep. The echo of Grace's calm voice replayed in her mind. "It depends on how we treat others." She turned in bed, angry at herself for feeling guilty. "She's manipulating me," she whispered, trying to sound wise to earn sympathy. Downstairs, Grace sat by the kitchen window, sipping tea and looking out at the night sky. The city lights glowed in the distance. From her small bag, she pulled out a folded photograph, an old picture of a smiling elderly man shaking hands with a younger Ethan Miller at a company event. Under the photo, the words read, "Dr. Samuel Carter, board advisor and friend." Grace ran her fingers gently over the image. Her eyes softened with emotion. "Soon," she murmured, "I'll finish what Father started." A soft sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. The old butler, Mr. Harris, entered quietly. "You should rest, miss—" He caught himself mid-sentence, realizing he nearly said too much. Grace looked up and smiled gently. "It's all right, Mr. Harris, my secret's safe." He nodded, eyes full of respect. "You remind me so much of him," Grace replied softly. "I just want to see if this house still deserves the heart he gave to it." Upstairs, Veronica was already planning something else. If that maid thought she could win sympathy, she was wrong. Veronica wanted to expose her. And the opportunity would come sooner than anyone expected. Because soon, she'd discover something in Grace's room. Something that would shake the entire foundation of the Miller mansion. The rain had started again that evening. Soft, steady drops tapping against the tall windows of the Miller mansion. The grand halls, usually filled with chatter and footsteps, now echoed with quiet. Most of the staff had gone to their quarters, the chandeliers dimmed, and the house lay half asleep under the heavy sky. Grace stood by the window in her small room at the far end of the servants' wing. Her room was modest, a narrow bed, a wooden desk, and a single photograph on the wall. She held her phone close to her ear, her voice low and steady. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Everything is proceeding as planned. The evaluation will be complete soon." A pause. "No, sir, she doesn't know anything." "But it's getting harder. The environment here is hostile." Her tone softened. "I'm doing this for him. For my father. He believed this company still had a heart. I just want to make sure that's true." She ended the call, sighed deeply, and turned toward the small table where a single file lay. On its cover was the Miller Corporation logo, a golden emblem embossed into thick paper. Inside were handwritten notes, company reports, and a letter signed by the board of directors, authorizing Grace Carter to act as an independent consultant under confidential observation. The truth was simple. Grace was no ordinary maid. She was the daughter of Dr. Samuel Carter, the late philanthropist and former board advisor who had once saved Ethan's company from bankruptcy. After her father's death, the board had asked her to evaluate the company's ethical values from the inside, starting with its most powerful symbol, the Miller mansion itself. Grace had accepted quietly, deciding to see with her own eyes whether Ethan Miller still led with kindness or whether success had hardened his home. But she hadn't expected to face the cruelty of Veronica. Downstairs, in the main hall, a soft clinking sound broke the silence. The butler, Mr. Harris, was polishing silverware when he heard faint footsteps coming from the servants' corridor. He frowned, walking toward the sound. and then froze. Veronica was standing there in her silk robe, holding a glass of wine. Her eyes were sharp, restless. "Good evening, Mrs. Miller," he greeted cautiously. "It's quite late." "I couldn't sleep," she said coldly. "I heard someone talking." "Was it that maid again?" Mr. Harris hesitated. "I believe she was just finishing her chores." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "At midnight?" She brushed past him, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Show me her room." Before he could protest, she was already at Grace's door. She turned the knob quietly and stepped inside. The room was empty. Grace had stepped out to return her phone to charge in the kitchen. Veronica's eyes scanned the space. Neat, tidy, ordinary. But something caught her attention. On the desk lay the file. Her curiosity sparked. She walked closer, her fingers brushing over the golden logo. Miller Corporation. Her heartbeat quickened. She opened it, and her expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. Reports, company notes, financial ethics, employee treatment analysis, and there, at the bottom, was a letter from the board itself. Grace Carter, authorized consultant. Confidential evaluation. Veronica's hand trembled slightly. "Carter?" she muttered. "Where have I heard that name before?" And then it hit her. Dr. Samuel Carter, the man Ethan always spoke so fondly of, the man whose portrait hung in the company's main lobby. Her face turned pale, then red with fury. "So this is her game!" she hissed. "She's spying on us, on me!" Just then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Grace returned, freezing when she saw Veronica in her room. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "that's my private file." "Private?" Veronica scoffed. "You're a liar! You're here pretending to be a maid while secretly reporting to my husband's board? What are you after at his money? His pity?" Grace stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "You wouldn't understand, Mrs. Miller. I'm not here for money. I'm here for truth." "Truth?" Veronica snapped. "The truth is, you don't belong here. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of snake you really are." She stormed out, clutching the file like a weapon. That night, Grace sat on her bed, staring at the empty space where the file had been. The rain poured harder now, rattling against the window pane. She knew tomorrow would bring a storm, one that no roof could keep out. But she wasn't afraid. Her father's words echoed in her heart. "Grace, when people show you cruelty, don't lower yourself to their level. Just let the truth speak. It always finds its way through." She closed her eyes, whispering, "Then tomorrow, let the truth speak." Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Miller mansion, but the air was colder than ever. Every servant could feel the tension hanging like a storm cloud. Veronica had been awake since dawn, her anger simmering into a dangerous calm. The file she had found was now locked in her drawer, her secret weapon. She had planned everything. At 10 sharp, she summoned the entire staff to the grand hall. Her diamond necklace sparkled as she stood at the center, her smile sharp and cold. Grace entered quietly, unaware of what was waiting for her. "Good," Veronica said, her tone almost sweet. "We're all here. It's time for some honesty in this house." The maids exchanged anxious glances. The butler shifted uncomfortably. Grace stood still, her calm eyes betraying no fear. "I discovered something last night," Veronica began, her voice rising. "Our dear maid, Grace, isn't who she says she is. She's been lying to us all, sneaking around with company documents, pretending to be one of us while secretly reporting to the Miller Corporation's board." A murmur spread through the room. Grace didn't move. "I even found this," Veronica continued, holding up the file. "A full report written in her name. Grace Carter, isn't it?" "Quite a fancy name for a maid," Grace spoke softly. "Mrs. Miller, please, don't you dare talk back to me," Veronica snapped. "I should have known from the start. The fake manners, the fake dignity, all an act. Tell me, Grace, what's your real goal? Money? Fame? Or were you hoping to seduce my husband?" Gasps echoed through the hall. The words hit like stones. Grace's face turned pale, but she didn't cry. "That's enough," Mr. Harris said softly, stepping forward. "Mrs. Miller, please stay out of this," she shouted. "This woman has fooled all of you. She's nothing but a liar in uniform." Grace took a slow breath. You can say whatever you wish, ma'am, she said quietly. But one day the truth will stand even if I don't. Veronica's temper exploded. Don't talk to me in riddles, she screamed, and before anyone could react, she raised her hand and slapped Grace across the face. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. Grace stumbled slightly, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. The staff gasped in horror, and in that very instant, the front door opened. The echo of footsteps filled the silence. Ethan Miller stood in the doorway, his briefcase still in hand, his expression dark and unreadable. His eyes swept across the frozen scene, Veronica standing in fury, Grace trembling, the staff paralyzed. Veronica, he said slowly, his voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the air. What's going on here? Veronica blinked, caught off guard. Ethan, thank God you're here. This woman, this maid, has been deceiving us. She's an imposter! I found proof. She thrust the file forward like a trophy. Ethan walked forward, his face emotionless. He took the file from her hand, opened it, and scanned the contents quietly. When he looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were disappointed. Do you even know who she really is? He asked. The room went completely silent. Veronica frowned. She's a liar, pretending to be someone she's not. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, Veronica. She's Grace Carter, daughter of Dr. Samuel Carter, the man who saved this company 10 years ago. The board sent her here to evaluate our home, to see if the values we preach in business are lived inside these walls. Veronica's mouth fell open. What? Ethan continued, his voice firm now. You just slapped the daughter of the man who gave us everything. You humiliated her in front of everyone, and you failed every test of integrity she came to observe. Gasps filled the hall. Grace lowered her gaze, silent as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Not from pain, but from the truth being set free. Veronica's face drained of color. Ethan, I didn't know. That's the problem, he said coldly. You never cared to know. He turned to Grace, his tone softening. Grace, I'm deeply sorry for everything you've endured in my home. Your father would be proud of you, and ashamed of what we've become. Grace nodded quietly. Thank you, sir. My father always believed in second chances. She turned toward Veronica, her voice gentle but firm. I forgive you, Mrs. Miller. But remember, the way you treat people below you says more about you than it ever will about them. And with that, she walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than any slap could ever make. Veronica stood frozen. The grand chandelier above flickered softly, its golden light glinting off the tears on her cheeks. The silence in the mansion was heavier than ever. Only the soft hum of the fireplace filled the room. A moment ago, she had been the queen of this palace, proud and untouchable. Now she felt smaller than ever. David took a slow breath and turned to his wife. You humiliated the only person who showed kindness to our family when no one else would, he said quietly, his voice trembling with restrained emotion. Lena isn't just a maid. She's the woman who helped my mother survive after our family lost everything years ago. Veronica's eyes widened, disbelief shadowing her features. What are you saying? She's the reason I'm standing here today, David continued. When my father abandoned us, my mother was sick and penniless. Lena's family took us in. They gave us food, shelter, and dignity when no one else cared. I promised myself I'd repay that kindness someday. And when I finally found her, I offered her a job here so she could live comfortably. Lena stood quietly, tears streaming down her face. She had never asked for recognition. She simply wanted to help, to work, and to live with respect. Yet life had once again tested her patience and strength. Veronica's knees weakened. Her entire world, and built on pride, status, and appearances, began to crumble. She fell to her knees, looking at Lena with shame. I didn't know, she whispered. I let my arrogance blind me. David's tone softened, but it was still firm. Respect doesn't depend on titles or skin color, Veronica. It depends on humanity. You've forgotten that. Veronica began to sob, her perfectly polished image falling apart. Lena, I'm so sorry, she cried, her voice shaking. I judged you without knowing your heart. I humiliated you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Lena stepped closer, her expression gentle. "Mrs. Veronica," she said softly, "forgiveness doesn't erase the hurt, but it can start healing it. I accept your apology, not because I have to, but because I choose peace over pain." Those words hit everyone like sunlight breaking through a storm. The staff watching in silence wiped away tears. David closed his eyes for a moment, pride swelling in his heart for Lena's grace. Days later, the mansion felt different, lighter, warmer. Veronica personally arranged a small gathering in honor of Lena, introducing her as a woman of strength, dignity, and heart. The same hall that once echoed with humiliation now glowed with gratitude. As Lena stood beside David, she smiled humbly, saying, "True worth isn't found in wealth or power. It's found in kindness and how we treat those who have none." The video of the event later went viral, touching millions who saw in Lena's story a reflection of humility and grace. Many said they cried watching it, proof that one act of kindness could still change hearts. And as the camera faded out, David's voice narrated the final words that left viewers thinking long after. Before you judge someone's worth, remember, the person you look down upon today might be the reason you rise tomorrow. Friends, if this story moved your heart even a little, hit the subscribe button and join our community. Tell us in the comments which country you're watching from, and share this story to remind others that kindness never goes unnoticed. Until next time, believe in humanity, not hierarchy.